The village of Cana was alive with happiness. The warm sun shone over the small homes built of stone, while laughter echoed through the narrow streets. Families had come together from nearby towns to celebrate a wonderful wedding. Colorful robes filled the courtyard, children played happily, and the sound of joyful music drifted through the air. Friends greeted one another with smiles, and everyone thanked God for bringing such a special day. In those days, a wedding was one of the greatest celebrations a family could have. The feast often lasted for several days. Relatives, neighbors, and travelers gathered together to eat, sing, and rejoice. The bride and groom wanted every guest to feel welcomed and honored. Among the guests was a woman named Mary, the mother of Jesus. She was well known for her gentle heart and quiet faith in God. She greeted people warmly as they arrived, helping wherever she could. Mary cared deeply about others and wanted everyone to enjoy the celebration. Jesus was also invited to the wedding. He did not come alone. His first disciples came with him. They had only recently begun following Jesus after hearing his call. Although they were still learning who he truly was, they already sensed there was something extraordinary about him. As Jesus entered the celebration, many guests welcomed him with kind smiles. "Peace be with you," one elderly man said. "And with you," Jesus replied warmly. Children ran past him laughing, and Jesus smiled as he watched them play. The disciples looked around with wonder. The tables were covered with fresh bread, fruits, roasted fish, olives, honey, and many other delicious foods prepared for the feast. Clay lamps hung from wooden beams, ready to light the evening when darkness came. "This is a beautiful celebration," one disciple whispered. "It truly is," another answered. "God has blessed this family." Jesus quietly nodded. He enjoyed being among ordinary people. He shared their meals, listened to their conversations, and celebrated their joys. Though he was the Son of God, he did not seek attention for himself. He came with humility and love. The musicians began playing cheerful songs on their harps and flutes. Guests clapped their hands in rhythm while others danced with joyful hearts. The bride and groom smiled at one another, grateful to see so many loved ones gathered together. Meanwhile, servants hurried back and forth carrying food and filling cups for the guests. They worked carefully, making sure everyone had enough to eat and drink. Their feet moved quickly across the courtyard as they served each table with respect. One servant wiped sweat from his forehead. "There are so many people," he whispered to another servant. "Yes," his friend replied, "but everything seems to be going well." Nearby, Mary noticed the servants working tirelessly. She appreciated their efforts and quietly offered words of encouragement whenever she passed them. As the hours went by, the celebration grew even livelier. More guests arrived, bringing blessings for the newly married couple. "May the Lord give you many joyful years together," one guest said. "May your home always be filled with peace," another added. The bride and groom thanked each person with grateful hearts. The disciples watched Jesus carefully throughout the feast. Although he spoke kindly with everyone around him, there was something peaceful about him that was unlike anyone they had ever known. His presence brought comfort. His words were gentle, and his eyes reflected compassion and wisdom. As evening slowly approached, the courtyard glowed with the soft light of oil lamps. Families gathered closer around the tables, sharing stories, laughter, and songs of praise to God. Everything seemed perfect. But hidden beneath the joyful celebration, a problem was quietly beginning to unfold, one that only a few people had noticed. The servants exchanged worried glances. Something was running out. The joyful sounds of celebration continued to fill the wedding feast in Cana. Music floated through the evening air as families laughed together. Children chased one another around the courtyard, and the bride and groom welcomed each guest with grateful smiles. The servants, however, no longer shared the same joy. Behind the scenes, they hurried from table to table with anxious faces. One servant lifted a large wine jar and tilted it carefully. Not a single drop came out. His eyes widened. He quickly looked inside another container. It was nearly empty. His heart began to race. He hurried to another servant and whispered, "The wine is almost gone." The other servant froze. "What did you say?" "The wine," We have almost none left." Soon the servants gathered together, speaking in worried voices. "What are we going to do? There are still many guests. This feast is not over. If the wine is gone, the bridegroom's family will be deeply ashamed." In those days, hospitality was considered a great responsibility. A family prepared carefully for a wedding because they wanted every guest to be welcomed with generosity and honor. Running out of wine during the celebration would bring embarrassment upon the bridegroom and his family. The chief servant looked troubled. "We cannot hide this much longer," he said quietly. "What shall we do?" No one had an answer. As Mary walked through the courtyard, greeting guests and encouraging the servants, she noticed the worried expressions on their faces. She gently approached them. "What is troubling you?" she asked. One servant hesitated before answering. "My lady, the wine is gone." Mary looked toward the serving tables. She understood immediately. The joyful celebration could soon turn into disappointment. Without saying another word, Mary quietly walked through the crowd until she found Jesus. He was sitting with his disciples, speaking peacefully with them. The disciples listened carefully as Jesus shared words about trusting God and following his ways. Mary came near. "Jesus," she said softly. He looked up at her with kindness. "Mother." She spoke quietly so others would not hear. "They have no more wine." For a brief moment there was silence. Jesus looked toward the busy servants. He understood the situation completely. Then he answered, "Woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come." His words were calm and gentle. Mary did not argue. She did not question him. She had complete confidence in her son. She knew his compassion. She knew his wisdom. Although she did not know exactly what he would do, she trusted him completely. Turning away from Jesus, she walked toward the servants. They looked at her hopefully. Mary spoke only one sentence. "Do whatever he tells you." The servants nodded. Those simple words settled into their hearts. They had no idea what Jesus might ask them to do, but they were ready to obey. Nearby stood 6 large stone water jars. These jars were not used for drinking wine. They were kept for the Jewish ceremonial washing, according to the customs of the people. Each jar was very large, holding many gallons of water. The jars stood quietly along the edge of the courtyard. Most guests paid no attention to them, but Jesus did. He slowly rose from his seat. The disciples watched him with curiosity. Peter whispered, "What is he going to do?" Andrew shook his head. "I don't know." John kept his eyes fixed on Jesus. There was something peaceful and purposeful in every step he took. Jesus walked toward the 6 empty stone jars. The servants followed him. Their anxious faces searched his. The celebration continued around them. Music still played. Guests still laughed. The bride and groom remained unaware of the problem unfolding behind the scenes. Only a handful of people knew what had happened. Mary, the servants, the disciples, and Jesus. Standing beside the great stone jars, Jesus looked at the servants with quiet authority. Then he gave them a simple command. "Fill the jars with water." The servants looked at one another. It seemed like a strange instruction. Water. How could water solve the problem? Yet they remembered Mary's words. "Do whatever he tells you." Without another question, they hurried to obey. One by one, they carried heavy buckets from the well. Again, and again, and again. The work was tiring. Their arms ached. Their clothes became damp. Still they continued until every stone jar was filled completely. Filled all the way to the brim. Jesus looked at the overflowing jars. Everything was now ready. The servants waited silently. None of them could imagine what would happen next. The 6 large stone jars stood filled to the very brim with water. The servants stepped back, breathing heavily after making so many trips to the well. Their hands were tired, and their clothes were damp, but they had obeyed every word Jesus had spoken. The wedding celebration continued around them. Guests laughed together, musicians played joyful melodies, and the bride and groom welcomed family and friends with smiling faces. Very few people knew what had just taken place. Only Mary, the servants, the disciples, and Jesus stood near the jars. The servants looked at Jesus expectantly. They had done exactly what he had asked. Now they waited. Jesus looked at the full jars with calm authority. Then he gave another instruction. Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. The servants looked at one another. For a moment, no one moved. Take it to the master? But they had filled the jars with nothing but water. If they carried water to the master of the banquet instead of wine, they could be blamed for making fun of him. They might even lose their positions as servants. One young servant swallowed nervously. "What if he becomes angry?" he whispered. Another servant answered quietly, "We were told to do whatever he says." The first servant remembered Mary's words. "Do whatever he tells you." He took a deep breath. Then he picked up a serving cup and lowered it carefully into one of the stone jars. As he lifted the cup, his eyes suddenly grew wide. He stared in amazement. This was no longer water. The clear liquid had become rich, beautiful wine. Its deep color shimmered in the evening light. The servant could hardly believe what he was seeing. His hands trembled. Another servant hurried forward and looked into the cup. It is wine," he whispered. The others gathered around. Every jar that had been filled with water now contained wine. No one had poured grapes into the jars. No one had stirred them. No one had added anything at all. Jesus had simply spoken, and everything had changed. The disciples watched in astonishment. Peter looked from the jars to Jesus. His heart beat faster. Andrew smiled with wonder. John stood quietly, unable to take his eyes off Jesus. They had already believed that Jesus was the one sent by God. Now they were witnessing his power with their own eyes. Mary watched silently. She gave thanks to God in her heart. The servants carefully filled a serving cup with the new wine. One servant carried it across the courtyard toward the master of the banquet. Each step felt heavier than the last. "What if this is not really wine?" he wondered. "But I saw it myself." Finally, he reached the master of the banquet and respectfully handed him the cup. The master accepted it without knowing where it had come from. He lifted the cup. He tasted the wine. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his eyes widened with surprise. He took another sip. The wine was excellent. It was rich, fresh, and unlike any he had tasted before. Immediately, he called for the bridegroom. The bridegroom hurried over. "Yes, sir." The master smiled with amazement. "Everyone brings out the choice wine first," he said, "and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had plenty to drink. But you have saved the best until now." The bridegroom looked puzzled. He had not brought out another supply of wine. He did not know what had happened. Yet he smiled thankfully as the guests continued enjoying the celebration. The master of the banquet praised him before everyone, never realizing that a miracle had taken place. The servants, however, knew. They had filled the jars with water. They had watched Jesus speak. They had drawn out wine. They looked at Jesus with awe and reverence. The disciples also understood that they had witnessed something extraordinary. This was no ordinary teacher. No ordinary man could command creation in such a way. Without noise or display, Jesus had revealed his glory. His very first miracle had quietly taken place at a family wedding, not before kings or crowds seeking signs, but among ordinary people celebrating one of life's happiest moments. The disciples' faith in him grew stronger. They were beginning to understand that the one they followed truly had power that belonged to God alone. The wedding feast in Cana continued late into the night. Music filled the courtyard, lamps glowed softly in the darkness, and guests laughed with renewed joy. No one realized that a miracle had just taken place among them. The servants moved through the crowd, pouring wine from the jars that had once held only water. The master of the banquet continued praising the bridegroom for serving such wonderful wine at the end of the celebration. The bridegroom smiled, still unaware that Jesus had rescued his family from embarrassment and shame. But the servants knew. And the disciples knew. They had seen the impossible happen right before their eyes. Jesus stood quietly among the guests, not seeking attention or praise. He had come to a wedding to share in the joy of ordinary people, and there he revealed his power for the very first time. John later wrote that this miracle was the beginning of the signs Jesus performed, and through it he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. As the celebration continued, the disciples gathered together for a moment, speaking in hushed voices. Peter shook his head in amazement. "I watched them fill those jars with water," he said. "There is no doubt about it." Andrew nodded. "Who can do such a thing except someone sent by God?" John looked toward Jesus, who was speaking kindly with a group of guests. "I believe we are seeing the beginning of something far greater than we understand." Mary overheard their conversation and smiled quietly. Her heart was filled with gratitude. She remembered the promises God had spoken years earlier about her son. Now she was watching those promises begin to unfold. The servants, too, would never forget that night. Whenever they looked at a water jar again, they would remember how Jesus had turned ordinary water into the finest wine. They had learned that obedience to Jesus, even when his instructions seemed strange, could lead to something wonderful. As the feast came to an end, families began preparing to return home. The bride and groom thanked their guests, unaware that their wedding would be remembered for generations because Jesus had been there. The stars shone brightly over Cana as people walked through the quiet streets, talking about the joyful celebration. And Jesus left Cana with his disciples, who followed him with deeper faith than before. They had seen that Jesus cared about the needs of people. He noticed a family's problem before most guests even knew it existed. He brought abundance where there was lack, joy where there was fear, and honor where there might have been shame. The miracle of Cana was not only about water becoming wine. It was about the heart of Jesus. He entered an ordinary family celebration and transformed it. And he still does the same today. When we invite Jesus into our homes, our worries, our relationships, and our daily lives, he can change what seems ordinary into something beautiful. He can provide when we feel empty, bring peace when we feel anxious, and restore hope when we think all is lost. The people of Cana went home remembering a joyful wedding. The disciples went home remembering the glory of Jesus. And the world would forever remember the day Jesus turned water into wine, the first sign that the Savior had come. Reflection. Imagine being one of those servants that night. You carried bucket after bucket of ordinary water, wondering why Jesus asked you to do such a strange thing. Nothing looked different at first. Nothing seemed miraculous. But when you obeyed and drew the water out, everything had changed. Many times in life, God asks us to trust him before we can see the result. A kind word, a prayer, an act of forgiveness, helping a family member, or choosing to do what is right may seem small and ordinary. Yet in God's hands, ordinary things can become extraordinary blessings. Jesus did not perform his first miracle in a palace or before powerful rulers. He did it at a family wedding, showing that he cares deeply about the joys, struggles, and needs of everyday families. Think about your own home. A loving word can heal a hurting heart. Respect can bring peace. Prayer can bring hope. Your actions can encourage your parents, your children, your brothers, your sisters, and even future generations. Just as Jesus transformed water into wine, he can transform our families when we invite him into our lives. Moral lessons from the story. Jesus cares about ordinary people and their everyday needs. Obedience to Jesus brings blessings, even when we do not understand his instructions. God can transform what seems ordinary into something wonderful. Faith grows when we trust Jesus and see his work in our lives. Our actions can protect, encourage, and bless our families, just as Jesus protected the bridegroom's family from shame. When Jesus is welcomed into a home, he brings joy, hope, and peace. Remember this: the choices you make today can affect your entire family tomorrow. A child who learns to obey God can become a blessing to their parents. A parent who chooses kindness can change the atmosphere of the whole home. A brother or sister who forgives can bring peace to the family. Small actions, when given to Jesus, can become miracles of love and hope. So invite Jesus into your home, your decisions, and your daily life. Let him transform your family just as he transformed the water in Cana. Please like this video, subscribe, and share this story with your family and friends so more hearts can be encouraged by God's word. Type in the comments, "Jesus, fill my heart, my home, and my family with your joy and peace." And let this be your prayer today. God bless.